Canon's already announced the R1 and it's going to ship at the end of November. And the R6 Mark III? Q1 of 2025. But according to some reliable sources, Canon will be introducing not one, not two, but 3 cameras in 2025. And one of them will be a high-resolution camera north of 100 megapixels, a camera that's been rumored for 5 years now. But before we get to the details, please subscribe to this channel. It doesn't cost you anything, helps this channel grow, and keeps you up to date on the latest camera coverage. Canon Rumors said, we've been hearing that Canon will add 3 segments of cameras to the EOS R lineup in 2025. 2 will be for full frame and the other for APS-C. There's no secret that the Canon EOS R1 is going to start shipping at the end of November, November the 26th according to B&H. And it's not one of the 2 full-frame cameras. And the R6 Mark III, well, again, according to Canon Rumors, that's supposed to start shipping sometime in Q1 of 2025, along with a bunch of Sony cameras. And that's also not one of the 2 full-frame cameras. We're talking about 3 new cameras that no one's talked about yet. So what about the R7 Mark II? Sorry, that's not going to happen, at least not according to Canon Rumors. The APS-C camera will be far more video focused than any other APS-C camera in the lineup. And I know what you're thinking, this has got to be the R7C, right? That camera that was rumored about 2 years ago? That's what I would be thinking, but again, also coming from Canon Rumors, I think it was last year, the R7C is dead. It's done for, unless, of course, they've resurrected it. It's a possibility, but according to Canon Rumors, it's not going to be the R7C at all. Take a look at Sony. Take a look at their lineup to give us an idea of what can be expected. After all, Sony does have a very busy lineup. And one particular area that Canon could be going after is that Sony vlogging line. But with cameras like the ZV-1 priced at $598, on sale $150 off, sporting a full-frame camera at 20.1 megapixels would prove a bit of a challenge for Canon. And as I read that, I kept coming back to this whole vlogging line. If we take a look at Canon's current lineup with the R50, I think it's a really solid entry-level camera for photographers and videographers, offering 15 frames per second continuous stills or 6K oversampled 4K for essentially $500 to $600, where I know its regular price is $649 or $629, but it's been on sale for the better part of the last 4 months and it doesn't seem to be changing. And then we have the R100, which is essentially the R50 Mark II without the flippy screen. It's okay, it's not super exciting. And then we have the R7 and the R10, or the R10 and the R7. Unless Canon does what Sony does, where they have, 15 or 10 different cameras for a price segment, it's kind of hard to figure out what they could do. Now, an R7 Mark II makes sense to elevate the capabilities of that camera to make it a little bit more of a pro-end APS-C camera, and there's certainly room to do that with the R7. And the R10, well, Canon could do a better job there as well. I love the 70D, the 60D, the 50D, and I kind of felt like the 90D, while a good camera, was ready for a whole lot more. The R10 does give us a whole lot more, but in a smaller camera. It's certainly ready for, well, would Canon go with an R10 Mark II, or would they just do an R20 like they used to do in the old naming convention? It's really hard to say. I find this a very crowded line, and I'm not exactly sure what Canon could do. I mean, the vlogging segment certainly makes sense, and if you look at the R50, it kind of competes up against Sony's vlogging line. There's a lot of really good cameras from the ZV-1, and I know it's full frame through a whole bunch of cameras. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about APS-C. I'm really curious to know what your thoughts and expectations of a whole new segment, and that's the key word here, a whole new segment. And that's why I thought vlogging. I can't really think of another segment that would generate the profits necessary in large quantities. And again, I got that idea from looking at Sony's lineup. But now let's turn our attention to full-frame cameras, because we're supposed to get 2 new segments for the EOS R lineup. Full-frame cameras, and They're looking pretty exciting. And again, if you didn't catch the intro, we're not talking about the R1 or the R6 Mark III. Last year in April of 2023, Canon rumors said that we should expect a retro-looking full-frame camera, with a Canon executive chiming in, suggesting that the R5 Mark II would make a perfect base. And I had a lot of fun with a video coming out on that, and one of my favorite retro-styled cameras was the AE1. It's a gorgeous-looking camera. It's got sleek lines, bold lines. However, if you're going to do a retro-style camera, you're probably going to want to target a price point to where you're going to make your money back on it. You're going to use another camera as a base. Look at what Nikon did with the ZF. I think what Canon would likely do here is, while the R5 would be a good base, that's an awfully high price point to hit. If I was Canon, I would look at maybe the R8 or even the R6. That would be a good solid base to base a retro camera off of. Not the R5 Mark II. Even though Canon said that sometimes it's just an idea, and until something is announced, we don't know. But 2025, we are getting 2 new segments, with one of them being a retro-styled camera. We just don't know any of the specifications. We don't know any of the specifications for any of these cameras, with the exception of our next camera, and it's going to be a bold one. The long-rumored high megapixel camera, north of 100 megapixels. Sometimes it was 100 megapixels, sometimes 102 megapixels. And this has been rumored since 2020. And every year, a new rumor about this high megapixel camera based off of the R5 gets recirculated once again with some more information, refreshing, saying, yeah, it's coming, it's on the way. Sometimes we get some sort of story back in, January or February. Sometimes we hear something in May. Sometimes it's late in the year. And, well, here we go again. According to Canon rumors, we know Canon has tested a 102 megapixel sensor over the past couple of years. When it comes to a 100 megapixel camera focused on photography, the big question is the market big enough to support such a camera? We honestly think that this is the only thing holding back a higher megapixel camera coming to market. Fujifilm is the only stills hybrid camera maker to actually produce a camera with a 100 megapixel sensor, or anything north of 100 megapixels. And based on what the rumors have told us, I can't see this being based off of the R5. The sensor, for example, would have to be a completely redesigned sensor, producing 45.7 megapixels versus 100 megapixels. Well, the architecture would be completely different. To double the resolution, you have 4 times the amount of information per frame. 4 times the amount of information. So you're moving a whole lot more data a whole lot faster. And that's a big hurdle to overcome. It can be done, but you have to redesign the sensor. You have to redesign the pathways. You have to redesign the image sensor. You see what's going on here? The digic processor, the thermal architecture, and every other component. This is not just a matter of taking the R5 Mark II and saying, okay, let's just replace the sensor and let's slap a new label on it and get it out the door, and let's tone down the number of continuous shooting stills per second and maybe remove some video capabilities. No, this is going to be, this type of camera, if it was to exist, Canon would have to place a price tag on it, nothing less than $4,000, and even then I think that might be a very bargain basement price for a camera like this. I could see a camera like this, based on the redesign for the limited market that would require this, to be quite a bit north of $4,000, maybe even $59.99, the release price of the R3. And as excited as I am about the possibility of a 102 megapixel Canon full-frame camera, I'm a camera geek after all. I think we've got a much greater probability of having the White House announce that they are in possession of non-human craft and non-human bodies than we are. The probability of Canon announcing a 102 megapixel camera based off of the R5 Mark II. Canon's last high megapixel camera was 50 megapixels, only 5 megapixels more than the R5. Is there really enough of us to warrant a 100 megapixel high resolution camera? That's a question I would like you to ask in the comment section down below, and I might even do a poll on this, because I'm really curious if the market's big enough. Because after owning the R5 and now the R5 Mark II, 45.7 megapixels is an awful lot. Actually, it's 45 megapixels. I'm confusing that with a Nikon Z8, but either way, 45 megapixels, that's a lot. And the fact that I can shoot wildlife at 30 frames per second with pre-capture of 15 frames per second, that's pretty powerful. And not only that, I can shoot 8K video up to 60 frames per second. It's an all-round camera. And if you look at Fujifilm's medium format cameras, one of the drawbacks of those cameras is because you're moving so much data, you're not shooting as fast. You're shooting much slower. And of course, your video capabilities, well, they're not really known for their video capabilities. So I just don't think it makes an awful lot of sense. So, but again, you know, Canon Rumors has been very accurate at forecasting cameras over the past 10 years. And, you know, it depends on where they're getting this information. It could even be coming from within Canon. But you see, the tough thing about rumors is, and I know this from my own sources, even if your source is convinced that they're getting this information from another source, and even if they've seen paperwork indicating so, that doesn't mean some bean counter somewhere in the organization right up to the wire says, nope, we're not doing it. All I have to do is take you back to 2019, 2020. Canon was working on not only the R5, but also the 5D Mark V. Canon was working on both cameras. That's why it was taking as long as it was to get the R5, because they were working on two different models. Because back in 2019, the majority of Canon's revenue from sales of their cameras was coming from, guess what? Yeah, exactly. They're DSLRs, not mirrorless cameras. But because of what was going on in 2020, there were enough delays that they got the R5 out the door and it performed very well. That first set of leaked specifications in January got people all worked up, and every 5 weeks or so when Canon, Australia, USA, or whomever put out more information, it really got people excited to the point where Canon said, you know what, let's put a hold on that 5D Mark V and let's just see how this R5 thing does. And once it went on sale, once they had the pre-orders up, Canon had their answer. And it wasn't the only camera they had canceled. The 7D Mark III, it was another DSLR that they were working on, but they decided to cancel that as well. So one thing I do want to talk to you right now is deals of the week. And this is a little bit of FOMO. While we have a lot of new cameras coming out, while we have cameras like the R5 Mark II, which is right here, I've been trying to shoot some birds recently, and that's why it's always on this lens here. $42.99. I know it's not cheap. It's definitely not cheap. But the R5 Mark I, which is what I'm shooting with right now, $28.99. It's a really good price. And I think by the end of next month, when we hit Black Friday, I wouldn't be surprised if Canon trims off a little bit more on the price. We also have refurbished models and used models to get that camera down in price. The R6, $500 off. And just take a look at Nikon, the amount of cameras on sale from the Z8, $500 off, the Z7 Mark II, the Z6 Mark II. Basically taking a look at the top of Canon and Nikon all the way to the bottom, you're going to see sales galore. And even Sony has some sales as well. And I have about 20 to 30 cameras in the description down below. Some really incredible deals. And I'm not talking $50 off. I'm talking $100, $150 off. And these are even the low-end cameras. Some really great deals. And if you're interested in buying using those links down below, please do use my links to Adorama, B&H, and Amazon.com, because it's what supports this channel. By doing that, you're keeping this channel on the air, and it's very much appreciated. However, for transparency's sake, I do get anywhere from 2 to 5% back, depending on whether you use the links or not, or what you purchase. And it's very much appreciated. You don't have to put in any codes. You don't have to fill out any forms. It takes you directly to those retailer sites. I'm not in the middle anywhere at all. I'm just using their links to provide you with that access, and you get to save a bunch of money and you get to support this channel. It's the best of both worlds. And a big thanks to you for those of you watching at home. I just realized earlier today that this channel is 5 years old. It's 5 years old as of about 2-3 weeks ago, October the 27th. And if you like this channel, if you've been watching me for a while, I dare you, go back and take a look at that first video. see how green I was. See how serious. At the time, I thought I was doing a pretty decent job, but now, you know, it hasn't stood the test of time very well. It's very funny, but again, thank you for all of you that have followed me for a very long time. It's very much appreciated. I do this because it's a hobby of mine, because I love it. And when I retire in just about 4 to 7 years, this is going to be my, I don't know if we should call it full-time gig, but it's going to be my retirement gig. What better way to retire than to do something you love and actually help pay the bills a little bit? So a big thanks. Thanks for watching and supporting. Have yourself a great day, a great weekend, and we'll see you again soon. Oh, and for those of you in Canada, have yourself a happy Thanksgiving. Have you picked up a turkey yet? It's going to be funny to say this, but I got a good deal on the turkey. $17 for, I think, a 5 kilogram turkey. That's around $1.60 a pound. I remember when I was a kid, you can get them for 30 cents a pound. Then again, you can get a house for $30,000 as well. Or was it $60,000? Anyhow, when we left New Zealand, we sold our house for, I think it was $11,000. So it gives you an idea how things have come. But in this day and age, a turkey, 5 kilogram turkey, about 12 pounds for $17. And that's Canadian for those of you not in Canada, so that's a really terrific deal. Anyhow, have yourself a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you again soon. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.